What is up? It's your boy Johnny Shreve, aka Mr. Tell Like It Is. I'm here with a special guest. We have the Scientific Snitch, Ella, on the channel today, and we are going to talk about training methodologies, nutrition, supplementation, all things that you might have some questions about or want some myth busting to happen. Either way, we're gonna get into it right away. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
From all of what you know, right? So like, I mean, you know a lot more than I do. In terms of like education wise, I do have a lot more experience in terms of like training people. Say I'm right or wrong. But for me, I have these like 5 non-negotiables for like, at least building muscle. And it's like training stimulus, it has to be, now we can get into that, but the training stimulus where it's hard enough. Eat enough protein. I always do like 1 grams of protein per body weight to find that's enough to cover all bases. If you're in the older demographic or if you're in a caloric deficit, that'll cover enough for you. Is that fair to say 1 grams of protein per body weight is good enough?
It's also just easy to know. People who like to say, oh yeah, it's 0.7 now. I'm like,
yeah. Right. So and then eat enough calories. I always say like this, if you can have all the protein you want, but you're not eating enough calories, you're not going to have enough energy to help you grow properly. Now, I know you can still build muscle in a deficit, but if you're my size, if you're 215 pounds and you're eating 1,200 calories, it's probably going to do some kind of damage to you, not in terms of like your ability to actually grow muscle, especially when it comes to like macronutrient breakdown. If I'm trying to get 1 grams of protein per body weight, I'm eating 1,200 or 1,500 calories, and then I want to have a healthy amount of fat, which would be like 20 to 30% of my caloric intake, then at least having trying to strive for like 30 to 35 grams of like fiber for carb wise. I wouldn't be able to do that if I'm eating too many less calories. Then that's gonna hinder my ability to actually like build muscle. And so is that accurate, or from that caloric standpoint, would you find that accurate or not accurate, or where's the holes?
generally speaking, that is pretty accurate. However, I would put a little more emphasis on carbs rather than fat intake. And you'll be surprised to know about this, because it's just, oh my God, there's this one researcher who is like obsessed with having like fat in their diet for hormone health for whatever reason, and he has like the worst freaking studies that he cited. Anyways, so basically if you supplement with essential fatty acids and fat soluble vitamins, you're pretty much good to go. As long as you have the essential fats down, you don't really need to worry about having that much fat. In fact, I have maybe around 40 grams of fat, which is pretty low for females, and I'm hormonally healthy with PCOS. So it goes to show like how little fat actually matters for hormones. However, carbs on the other hand, a really fun fact is your skeletal muscle is the primary site of insulin-mediated glucose disposal, which is a fancy way of saying your skeletal muscle sucks in sugar like a sugar sponge.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I should have kind of slowed down. When I get into like my breakdown of like macronutrients, if I'm going to create a plan for myself or whatever, I would say this is how I get my caloric intake. So let's just say that I'm eating 3,000 calories, 1 grams of protein per body weight, 10 grams of protein. And then, depending on where I'm at, I would probably do lower end of like 20 grams, 20% of my whole caloric intake of the 3,000 would be from fat. And then what's left over is carbs, right? And that would be like a good amount. And then within those leftover carbs, I want to make sure that I'm eating a good enough amount of fiber. Yeah, so apart from that, and then obviously sleep, and then, water. What I mean?
And like, honestly, all of that is like, the exact amount is so debatable. Like, if somebody came to me and was like, I'm eating 30% fat, is that optimal? I'm like, sure. Like,
Yeah.
The exact amount doesn't matter. As long as you're hitting the amount that makes you feel good, that allows you to train hard, that allows you to build muscle. If you're progressing, who am I to say that you're not supposed to do that? Like, that's not my...
Yeah.
I'm not here to say that.
So it is a very like obvious individual thing, anecdotal words. Like even what I've said, it can be taken with a grain of salt when in terms of it's gonna be very individual for somebody. So like for me, I kind of look at that end of when I'm coaching someone, if I'm changing their diet, and we're prepping for something and we're going down in calories, I'll change some of the macronutrients in terms of like fats to help with like satiation. And just like I found that when just for myself, and this is the extreme part of it, that when prepping someone for a show and getting down to lower calories, that having a higher amount of fat tends to be better for them in the end in terms of like keep them quite sane still, satiated with good amount of like sustainable energy while maintaining that kind of constant of like protein. And that's when I kind of changed percentages wise. But for the general person that just wants to be healthy and fit and not extreme, is there like a rule of thumb where we can say, hey, this is enough, like 101 grams of protein per body weight's not that bad? But I know for sure I can definitely eat, I don't eat 101 grams of protein per body weight every single day. As long as I know that it's more of a spectrum type thing.
I would say it mainly depends on your appetite. Like for me personally, I've got PCOS, like I've got insulin resistant PCOS. I've got an appetite the size of a full grown man. I eat like 200 and something grams of protein a day just to keep myself satiated. And it's not because I'm trying to get there, it's because it's what keeps me full. And it's like, it's very personal, person to person. I mainly say like, instead of trying to restrict and like say, oh, you can only have this amount or this amount or this amount, I say, here are the things you should worry about just limiting, but you don't have to take it away. Just try not to have that as your entire diet and you're pretty much good. I'd say really focus. Fiber and protein are the two things that seem to really be good for just reducing your risk of chronic diseases and overall health.
Healthy, well-rounded, you know, fats, proteins, and carbs, fiber, good healthy fats, good healthy meats, fruits, vegetables, all those things are great. But then the amounts of it, they're gonna help you.
And then limiting saturated fat, cholesterol, and added sugars. And people can debate me on that all you want, but I'm sorry, but the data just says otherwise. And I work in a cardiology lab, so I literally know that. So
most people, when you hear sugar, you know, you got like, what's his name? What's that idiot's name?
and Paul Saladino.
Yeah, like the sugars, don't eat sugar. You know, sugar is stupid. Fucking sugar. This black guy, I forget his name. When people say,
Eddie, have you?
right, yeah. So when people say like sugar, like they don't understand like what sugar actually is. Like they think sugar is like, oh, table sugar, white table sugar is bad, and that is also what fruit is. And that's also what, you know, so what do you mean by, so we have people saying like, yeah, Ella just said I can't have sugar, and then added sugars and cholesterol. What is that for the general public so they actually know what that actually is? So things to avoid. So right now what you said is basically protein and fiber are your game day decisions because they're going to keep you healthy 100%.
Yes.
Then these are that's what you want to like basically emphasize. Then the other things is what you want to stay away from.
Yes.
What are these? So break down what is cholesterol, whatever, added sugars, saturated fats. Explain what that is. What does that look like for the basic, you know, public?
I got you. So first of all, I just want to also emphasize that micronutrients, please try to get all of them. Like if you can, eat a very diverse diet. Like, so just to like kind of broaden the spectrum on like what to focus on, fiber, protein, and a diverse diet. If you're eating a diverse diet, you're almost 100% going to hit everything that you need. If you're only eating one type of protein,
Diverse being, for everyone who knows,
like diverse being like,
different.
don't just eat the same thing every day. Like that's what I'm trying to say. Like if you eat a diverse diet, you're almost guaranteed to hit all your micronutrients. Almost guaranteed. Given the fact that you're eating enough. So like not like eating sub like 1,000 calories. Like if you're eating enough protein, fiber, and diverse diet, and you're pretty much good there. Now, getting into the added sugars. This is a really big myth that I think everybody is going, I already can smell the comments down on this one. Added sugar doesn't cause insulin resistance, surprisingly enough. It's mainly an issue because it's easy to eat. And if you are eating in a caloric surplus for an extended period of time, you're increasing your risk of obesity, basically. And there's a ton of reasons why for that. It's like adipogenesis, lipogenesis. I've talked about it a little bit on my Instagram, how if you cause like fat cells to hypertrophy or get bigger, they can send some pretty nasty signals to your brain to tell you to eat more. That's the reason why I say to kind of limit or dial back on added sugars, not because they cause insulin resistance, just because they're easy to eat. And I could say the same thing about like butter or oil. Like if you can, don't just only eat that or like pour it all over your food, because it's going to make you want to eat more, because it's just not satiating. Now, as for saturated fat and cholesterol, they actually have a lot more evidence for causing insulin resistance, surprisingly. And the reason is because it directly hinders insulin signaling. So if for people who don't know, insulin is a hormone, and saturated fat, and specifically intramyocellular fat and cholesterol and bulky fats that like get inside of your cell and kind of mess things up, that is the, and I could send over like some links to like just graphs and stuff like that. But diacylglycerol-mediated insulin resistance, which is the formal term for fat-mediated insulin resistance, is driven primarily through cholesterol and saturated fat. So when we're talking about what causes issues with glucose metabolism, which primarily does affect skeletal muscle, based on the DeFranzo Lilly lecture article, which basically found that only skeletal muscle reduced in insulin sensitivity compared to your brain and splenic. That's the concept behind that, which is why I recommend limiting saturated fat and cholesterol, because we have evidence. There's a meta-regression analysis talking about how dietary cholesterol can increase regular LDL and ApoB, which makes freaking sense because your body can only handle oh so much. And then saturated fat, on the other hand, we already make saturated fat for our hormones. We already make it. So just consuming a crap ton of it, not gonna be very beneficial.
So basically, like, so I'm gonna tell someone, like, what does it look like on your, so if I'm in my kitchen or my cupboard or my fridge, what's that fat look like? Is it like butter?
I would say
Is
if you have the choice between 80-20 beef and 92 lean beef, I'd go with the leaner beef.
But someone that I know that is starting out with the carnivore diet, and she's getting her fats majority from fatty meats. And I'm like, that's not the fat you're supposed to be getting it from. You're supposed to, like, if you get fat, you don't want to get it from like salmon, you know what I mean? Or like, avocados, or, like, those are healthy fats, but like emphasizing or putting an emphasis on fatty meats is not the right kind of fat you're looking for when you're talking about that being something that affects insulin or causing insulin resistance. So if I'm eating, if I'm not eating extra lean ground beef, if I'm just eating ground beef and cooking it, not rinsing or whatever, and just like, and I have this all the time, that eventually is going to have bad, a negative effect on me. Now, would you say the same as like the fats or the oils or fats that don't melt in or the room temperature stay basically solid?
Yeah, so basically, if you want to think about it like bricks, like fatty acids are like bricks. Saturated fat, it's like you have cement in between those bricks, which keep it together, which is why it's solid at room temperature. While oil, it's more like a cobblestone wall where you can knock it over just by pushing it because there's nothing connecting it together. And that's the concept between the two different types of fats. We make our own saturated fat. We have saturated fat handling metabolisms, and I could go into the entirety and break down why the lipid energy model is bullshit, but regardless, the concept that non-essential fats are quote-unquote beneficial doesn't make sense considering we downregulate our own production to try to maintain a healthy amount. So when you eat in excess of it, you're basically telling your body, hey, that's not enough downregulation. We're going to try to force it down even more, but there's only oh so much you can downregulate your own production of saturated fat and cholesterol to a point where it starts becoming harmful, which is why you see people who are on the carnivore diet have really high HbA1c for not consuming any carbs, why they have really high LDL, why they have really high HDL, and HDL is a U-curve. It's beneficial to an extent, but it starts getting harmful when you get to really high amounts.
So basically, if you want to stay healthy, here's simple. You don't have to be evidence-based. You don't have to research everything in the world. Basically, eat enough protein and fiber and reduce, not stay away from, just reduce the amount of saturated fats and added sugars to your diet, and you're basically good on a nutritional standpoint.
Yeah, and honestly, like, the cholesterol part is really kind of like, you don't necessarily need to actively avoid it because it comes with saturated fat. Most saturated fat sources are going to have cholesterol, so if you just limit the amount of saturated fat you're having, you're pretty much good on the cholesterol base too. And it's not like eliminate it and you can just limit it. Our bodies have the handling mechanism for reducing the amount that we make. So like it's clear that we can handle it. We're not made of glass. We can take it. I get a lot of like vegan people on my page saying, "Oh yeah, you're validating what I'm doing." And I'm like, "No more meat." And I'm like, "I never said no meat. I just said don't eat it for every meal."
When you have to eliminate certain parts of like certain macronutrients completely, it's not healthy. No matter how we want to look at it, and sometimes nutrition ends up being more of a moral thing than it is an actual, practical and scientific and healthy thing. And if you take that away, it's like you cannot beat a well-rounded diet when it comes to healthy amount of carbs, proteins, and fats. And that's going to trump any other diet there is out there. It'll trump vegan, it'll trump carnivore, it'll trump keto. Eat carbs, proteins, and fats, healthy amounts, what we just said, and you're fine.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to be vegan for moral reasons, I understand. I work with animals. So I definitely understand the moral part. It's just when you try to make the argument for health, it does not hold up in the face of a balanced diet. It just doesn't.
And I want to second that too, because I should have said vegetarian more than anything else. Because I definitely do understand and respect why people are vegetarian. I mean, vegan. I get that 100%. But again, when we look at things, and this is why this is the part of science that I do like. That is like, you cannot argue that this is overall healthier for you. Now, when it comes to moral and stuff like that, that's your beliefs, and I respect that like anything else, and I will not knock that at all. That's your thing, but we have to put that up against actual health, longevity. We have two of the exact same copies. Elon Musk made two clones that are exactly like, I don't know, just to make it easy, right? Two clones, and they both train 3 days a week. They both do 150 minutes of cardio, and they're identical. But one eats, a well-rounded amount of carbs, fats, and proteins. The other one doesn't. It just does something else. It does the other list of things. The person A who's eating the well-rounded or whatever is going to last longer.
Yep, it's like if you eat a diverse, like that's the reason why, because diversity is so important in your diet. It's so hard to develop a well-rounded, like you're hitting all your micronutrients if you're eating like a diet that restricts so heavily on like certain food groups.
Right.
So it's like, it's not like an argument of, oh, this is better than that because X, Y, Z. It's just about if you hit all your nutrients, you're good.